Welcome back, everybody, to another edition of the TwinSpires Jury. Ashley Anderson is enjoying a much-deserved vacation this week, so I'll be filling into the host chair, joined as always by James Scully, and we have a new addition, a new face to the jury in Kellie Reilly. Today's version, James and I will bounce some best bets and fades off one another on this side of the Atlantic, and then we will, in each category, head to the other side of the pond, and Kelly's going to give us some thoughts on the closing day card of the Royal Ascot meeting on Saturday. And then we'll have each a what else topic to talk about, as well as highlighting some of our key promotions and tournaments going on at TwinSpires this weekend. So, James, without further ado, we will start with you. Your best bet comes in race 4 at Churchill Downs, taking a good position against what will likely be a strong favorite in this spot.
That's right, and thanks, Darin. Pleasure to have you on, Kelly. Excited to hear your Royal Ascot insights. My best bet is going to come in race 4, like Darin said. It is number 4, Accomplished Girl at Churchill Downs on Saturday. This is a filly or a mare that over the winter recorded a pair of stakes wins at Fairgrounds when she was up close to the pace. We're going to take a look at the second one of those, which came in early February. And Accomplished Girl really, like I said, got a good trip up close to the front end. And then in the stretch, just basically grinded her way past the pace setter and records a narrow win here. I like her. I like in this race here, she basically 2 starts. Last year at Keeneland, she went and ran in the Franklin, which was a Breeders' Cup turf sprint prep race. Didn't run any good in that spot. She didn't run any good at the Giants Causeway 2 starts back, which is basically another really strong field. Same horse won both the Franklin and the Giants Causeway. I'm throwing those Keeneland races out. This Accomplished Girl really showed an affinity for the Fairgrounds turf this winter. I thought that she got favorable pace scenarios in both of her wins, and she's staring at another one in race number 4 on Saturday. We have a filly in there in number 2, Bling, who comes off basically a questionable disqualification where she crossed over in the stretch. It made no impact whatsoever on who won the race, but she did cross over in front of a rival who finished 3rd, so they took her down. That race had a 21-2 44 flat pace. I'm expecting a much, much more moderate tempo that works against Bling. As well, the other thing with Bling, who's the 2-1 morning line favorite, that was a conditioned allowance last out. This is an open allowance, much tougher competition, I think. And the other short priced horse on the morning line, number 6, Cloud Walker, who's listed at 5-2. Now, she's a filly who's won at Churchill, run well in the past, but to me, she's not in good form, and she's a late runner who's not going to get a favorable setup as well. So I'll look for Accomplished Girl to get the jump on those 2 closers and prove best with a forwardly placed trip with Flavia and Pratt on Saturday.
Yeah, I think it's a good call out. A turf sprint like this, you often expect there to be an abundance of early speed. And this race, couple of horses, including Accomplished Girls, seem to want to go forward. BG Warrior possibly being the other, but they look much quicker than the rest of the field. And if she can get away from BG Warrior early or even stalk and track off that rival, either way, I think she's in a very advantageous position from a pace standpoint and likely get the jump on some of the other favorites in here. So definitely think this is a good call out in race 4 at Churchill, number 4, Accomplished Girl for James. I'm going a little bit international, though not nearly as far as Kelly. I'm going north of the border to Woodbine with a horse that I really like a lot in the Alleywow Stakes, which is race number 7 at Woodbine, going 6.5 furlongs on the EP Taylor turf course. Number 5 in here, It Ain't Two, I think is very, very interesting at an 8-1 morning line. And there is a bit of a trip angle, or quite a bit of a trip angle at play here. Her first start in the United States was against She's So Spicy in the Limestone. She's So Spicy's running at Ascot tomorrow. She then ran into her again last time out in the Mamselle, and it looks like maybe her form deteriorated. But you really have to go back and watch the replay at several important points, and we're going to pull that up here. To start with, here's the start of the race. And you see right there, she breaks dead last. And when you watch the head-on replay, she completely hopped and missed the start and cost herself a couple of lengths. So now as they roll down the backstretch and she tries to get herself in position, she passes a couple of rivals here. Obviously, the rider clearly has a handful of horse at this point. Now another rival is going to come to her outside, and now she's going to start to get a little bit keen, a little bit rank here. And you see the rider's got a hard hold in her, and she's in tight. And now he's almost vertical in the saddle, and she checks right there as well. Now ends up in between horses, looking for a place to go. There is none, and is going to get keen and rank once again in this position as she tries to find her way into some racing room. I mean, she's about 10 lengths off the leaders at this point. And now, if you watch through the stretch, she's not going to make up considerable ground, but the rider literally never one time goes to the whip. He knows he has absolutely no chance of getting there. It's an assertive hand ride as they kind of come together and pinball off her once again there, but it is a hand. I mean, she's never really asked to do a whole lot here, and she is finishing okay and eased up here at the wire. The race is a complete and total toss out. It means absolutely nothing in terms of her form against the field like this. Coming out of two races again, she's so spicy. One of which she didn't get a chance to run at all. The other, she got beat a length at 8-1 in the morning line, going up against the field here that I think is significantly less from a caliber standpoint than what she's run against in each of the last two. I think she is a huge threat here for Riley Mott. Other people will see what I saw. I don't know if we're getting that 8-1. If we do, this month's mortgage might depend on it. If not, we'll have to see where the value is. But I think she's extremely live in this spot, and what hopefully is a decent enough number.
And that was a really hard knocking turf filly mare sprint too. That Mamzelle. I mean, she's so spicy. Ran huge and was going to Royal Ascot off it, but the runner-up came back and won. That Dream Away was in there. That was a nice field that day. And, I mean, to say she had trouble would be an understatement. She was completely taken out of her best chance.
Yep. Hopefully gets a much better chance on Saturday in the Alley Wow. All right, now we're going to go true international, and we're going to go across the pond as Kelly is going to provide her expertise on one of the more difficult meetings to handicap at Ascot. And Kelly, you have a horse that you have a lot of interest in race number 3 on Saturday, which is the Queen Elizabeth II Jubilee.
Yes, it's the Group 1 feature on the great closing day of the Royal Ascot meet, and I'm just besotted with the Japanese sprinter Satono Rave, and
I think we lost Kelly.
Oh no!
Yeah, I would jump in and take over and make the case for her, but we'll give her a second to get back up. It's kind of interesting, James. As we wait for Kelly, the Japanese horses in some of these international races have been a lot of the rage. We've seen it in Dubai, we've seen it in Saudi, and some of it over here. I was going to ask her about what the Japanese runners, how they're viewed when they go to Ascot, and sure enough, she has certainly picked one here in Satono Rave. But and the other thing there we go. Kelly has returned. I'm sorry. Yeah,
Kelly, you froze out on us. If you could take a step back.
I was vamping, awaiting your return, talking about Japanese runners on the international scene. So let's just reset it and go back to the beginning on Satono Rave.
Yeah, I'm sorry. That was another connectivity drop there with the the global thing. The thing that's so exciting about Satono Rave is the fact that it's not so much his Japanese form, because he did break through at the top level in the Takanamatsu Nemiya Tanana Chukyo at the end of March. What's really exciting about him is the fact that he's gone to Hong Kong twice and placed to the world's best sprinter, Kai Ying Rising, at his home track of Sha Tin. Satono Rave went there December for the Hong Kong International Races meeting for the Hong Kong Sprint, and he finished a very good third to Kai Ying Rising. He went back in April for the Chairman's Sprint Prize and finished second to Kai Ying Rising. He didn't get any closer. Kai Ying Rising actually expanded the margin between them. But what to me was significant was the fact that when Satono Rave finished second at the Chairman's Sprint Prize last time.
Yeah.
Oh boy. We have ghosts in the machine today. She made a compelling argument to start with, for sure. Oh, there you are. You're back again.
Yeah, I know what it is. It's the global connectivity thing I'm supposed to be on. I think I'm just going to disconnect that and hope it works, because okay. That's what keeps kicking.
Nope, I don't think that was it.
Well, or she went off the connectivity, and we'll reset when she comes back on.
Am I here?
Yeah,
Now
there
you're
you go.
back.
Okay,
Now you're back.
we're just gonna drop that thing and hope that I won't drop out once I've eliminated that. So back to Satono Rave's excellent international record. Uh, just to reiterate, it's not so much his Japanese sprint form, even though he is a top level winner at home. The main thing to me is the fact that he's twice placed the world's best sprinter, Kai Rising, in Hong Kong. He was third to him in the Hong Kong sprint in last December's Hong Kong International Races program, and he was runner-up last time in the Chairman's Sprint Prize. He didn't get any closer. Kai Rising was actually increased his margin last time, but the most significant thing is the fact that he actually fended off Helios Express to finish second last time out, whereas in December, Helios Express, who's another top-class Hong Kong operator, had actually shaded Satono Rev for second in the Hong Kong sprint. So to me, the fact that Satono Rev was able to fend off Helios Express to finish second last time out implies to me that he's continuing on his upward curve. And what's so interesting, not only the fact that he's been placing against Kai Rising, but also that I'm not sure if we really need to go overboard on the merits of the European sprinters either. The market leader right now is French-trained Lazat, and he has a compatriot Top Gear who also is very accomplished. And they are magnificent horses. My slight concern with them is that the French have not been running up to their best so far at the Royal Ascot meeting. So I don't know. Tomorrow we'll see how Zaragana does in the coronation. She might totally change the narrative, but so far, Map of Stars didn't quite fire as hoped, and the Prince of Wales's Candelaria was well beaten in the Gold Cup today. So my hesitation now is, do we really want to go overboard on French horses at Royal Ascot? Because again, let's see how Zaragana does. But for now, I'd be a little bit worried about taking too short a price on Lazat for the Queen Elizabeth II Jubilee. The other angle I find of interest with Satono Rave is that he's by Lord Kanaloa, who of course was such a magnificent sprinter from Japan, probably the greatest sprinter Japan has produced. So I think it would be fascinating if it's a son of Lord Kanaloa who's the one who's able to get Japan long-awaited a first win at Royal Ascot.
And you also have a couple of long shots in this field that you gave consideration to round out some of the exotics.
Yeah, I think one of them I'd written up in advance was Flora of Bermuda, my TwinSpires piece earlier over the weekend about long shots to watch at Royal Ascot. I kind of was hoping she would have gone in the King Charles III on Tuesday, but she's a new recruit for Wathnon Racing, and they decided to put her in the Saturday race. And they also have Lazat, the favorite. So I thought it was interesting that they were bullish enough on her in that race to put her in the Jubilee, even though they already have the early favorite for it. And what I like about Flora Bermuda, I've been a longtime fan of hers, but she actually had shown a lot of potential as a 2-year-old sprinter. She ran a sneaky sixth in the Queen Mary here a couple of years ago, the race that Crimson Advocate won. She was drawn on the wrong side, basically, so she was actually better than the bare finishing position would imply. And not only that, but she placed to Big Evs as well in the Flying Childers at Doncaster later that season. Last year as a 3-year-old, she was basically progressive throughout the year. She ended the season with a very close third in the British Champion Sprint at this track and trip. So I think that it's insignificant that she came back basically where she left off with her seasonal return in the 1895 Duke of York Stakes. She finished an excellent second, beaten only a neck by Inisharan, who's one of the main principals here in the Jubilee. And so I think Flora Bermuda is the type that's well-bred filly by Dark Angel, who gets so many wonderful sprinters, and he sired the Kadem, who won the race the past 2 years as a big long shot. So I think she has a lot of things going for her. The other one I wanted to mention, who's kind of grown on me since the final declarations came in this morning, is Anoff. Because he actually has course and distance form from earlier in his career. He was also third at huge odds in the King's Stand a couple of years ago, the race that's now the King Charles III, over 5 furlongs. But he was a really progressive sprinter for Mick Appleby, and he was just breaking through with a new career high in Saudi Arabia last year when he won the 1351 turf sprint against an international field. And just when it looked like he was developing into this great globetrotting sprinter, he came down with a near fatal bout of pneumonia. And of course, you can imagine how much time that takes to try to get over that, and not only return to health for training, but just from a peak athletic performance standpoint to try to get back to to his peak. And so I think a number of his races, between last fall and earlier this year, you can kind of forgive him that, because you can see he's still trying to work his way back. I think his last race, a very close third in the Cathedral at Salisbury, I think that indicates that he might be cycling back up to one of his better efforts, and he's adding cheek pieces, which could sharpen him up a bit, and he's reuniting with Russell Ryan, who rode him to victory in Saudi Arabia last year. So I think he could be the type, and we saw like a huge boil over in the King Charles III with American Affair winning. He could be the type that if he's back on his game and returning to what he looked like he could have been like a year ago, he could very well crash the party at a gigantic price. The other horse I just want to mention very briefly was just to describe the international degree of this field, is not only the Japanese runner and the French shippers, but also you've got an Australian export, Storm Boy, who's now with Aidan O'Brien. I think he would have been, he's still interesting. He would have been more interesting to me if he were still a better price, but of course his price has contracted recently. He was just like a really, really glamour 2-year-old over there in Australia. He was a favorite for the Golden Slipper, although he broke badly and recovered enough to to run a good race, but it certainly wasn't the race where I hoped to see. His 3-year-old campaign didn't quite go as according to plan, and I think sometimes he was just really affected by soft ground that was against him, and so he was transferred to O'Brien in hopes that they could kind of help him win, like reach the pinnacle that they thought that he could reach when he was a 2-year-old. And his prep in Ireland was just a non-event. Basically, it was just basically a pipe opener to see what they had and see how Aidan O'Brien was going to fine tune him coming into this. So I would expect Storm Boy to run much, much better. He's a beautifully bred son of Justify. Still has hope of panning out on the world stage. The only thing is that now I think the last time I saw he was about like 4-1 or something. And I just, given the fact that O'Brien's won this race a couple times with Australian exports, but they had different profiles from Storm Boy, and I think there are still some questions. Is he going to be able to fire his best shot to win this race right now? And I think if the price were better, he would be of greater interest to me. But it would not surprise me in the least to see him move forward dramatically off that Greenland's flop.
All right. A lot of information there. Appreciate it. Glad you went through it, because I certainly am not one you want to listen to handicap Royal Ascot. James, as we transition from the horses that we are interested in to the horses that we want to potentially fade, we'll keep the turf theme going at Churchill Downs with you.
That's right. My fade of the weekend is going to be in race 7, number 3, Echo Lane, and race 7 at Churchill on Saturday. And this 4-year-old, he's 5-2 morning line favorite, and I think it's easy to understand why he'll get bet in this race. He's finished next second last out, 2 back. He was 3rd in a stake at Tampa, and 3 back. He was a close 4th. So he's been right there at the wire, or at least close in recent starts. But the thing with Echo Lane to me is that I really thought his last effort, where he came up short at 6-5 or almost 7-5, left something to be desired. And he's not racing as close. He's not showing the tactical ability that he showed last year, I thought, when he was in really good form. You look at his the 2 win, or you actually even look at his win earlier this year at Gulfstream. He sat in up close 3rd in that race, always within a length of the lead. And his 2 prior wins last year, he was on or extremely close to the pace from the start of both of those races. So to me, that last race really left something to be desired. Like I said, I thought he should have gotten the job done at short odds, and he's not showing the tactical ability he did before. So I like a few in here better, and we'll try to beat Echo Lane at a short price.
All right. I will keep the Churchill Downs theme going. We'll talk about our first race, Run Over the Dirt, race number 10, which is an entry-level allowance event going 6.5 furlongs for the 3-year-olds. And I'm going to fade Invictus in here. And It's not so much that I have a strong opinion on any one horse someplace else. I just think this is a highly competitive field, and Invictus is just far from a sure thing in here. His race two back certainly was impressive. He beat Camp Hale in that race, who came back to win a maiden special weight, and those two are actually the two morning line choices hooking up in this spot once again. But this race has a lot of early speed or horses that want to be forward. And when you have a race where a lot of horses are looking for similar spots, things tend to really quicken up front. And I think it could definitely play into the hands from a horse that's coming from off the pace. Maybe a More Patri, who's a horse that has shown versatility and can go forward, can come from off it. David of Athens, whose lone start resulted in an off the pace victory at Keeneland, in which he earned an extremely sharp figure for Brendan Walsh, who has good numbers with horses off the comeback, good numbers with horses that are going to be getting Lasix for the first time as well. So really what this just comes down to is I think this is a highly competitive field without a strong opinion one way or the other. But I think Invictus coming out of the Sir Barton behind Crudo could certainly be overbet. The fact that he's got a victory recently over the second choice, I think is probably going to add to the fact that he's going to take a lot of money. And so I'm just going to go elsewhere. And this is a favorite that I'm going to leave off of my multi-race exotic tickets at any type of a short price in race number 10 at Churchill Downs on Saturday.
The thing that I have to say though, this is a Brad Cox colt, out of Serengeti Empress, and he had a real big reputation off of that maiden win. Like you referenced, he won by more than 2 lengths over Cap Hale, who came back and crushed rivals at odds on. And that race was going 7 furlongs at Keeneland. And we saw a similar pattern from another Brad Cox trained 3-year-old Patch Adams, who also impressively, I thought, broke his maiden going 7 furlongs at Keeneland. When they stretched him to 2 turns, he ran poorly in a pair of stake races. And then when they cut him back to a sprint, he was pretty good looking, winning a really tough race on the Derby undercard. So that is a little bit of the liability with Invictus. And, he might just be a one-turn horse. I'm not like faulting you for taking a stand against him, because I think he'll definitely get bet down from his 3-1 morning line. This horse has a huge reputation. So, but that is the concern that, will he relish the cutback like Patch Adams did?
Yeah, valid point for sure. Certainly agree. Not saying he's not the horse to beat, just can poke a few holes in him, especially if he's going to be a very short price and what I think is probably a more competitive race than appears on paper. All right, let's go back over to the other side of the pond once again. And Kellie's going to give us a horse that she thinks is vulnerable as a favorite. And it is a name that you don't need to be a fan of just Ascot or international racing to know. It's a horse that we've seen on this side of the pond.
Yeah, and this could be one of those that makes me look really stupid really fast. But I think Rebels Romance, our 2-time Breeders' Cup Turf star, he looks vulnerable to me in the Hardwick, and not on a matter of just basic form, because obviously he's fantastic globe trotter for Godolphin. I mean, he's won literally all over the world, from Hong Kong to Dubai. Obviously here stateside, Germany. So he's been all over the place. He's been a fantastic money spinner for them. And who would have thought he'd have such a magnificent career on turf when he started out years ago? And we remember him as the UAE Derby winner. It's almost impossible to imagine what his career trajectory has been from back in his old dirt days in Meydan. But the reason why I'm skeptical of him on Saturday is the way he's been campaigned this year, because he was earlier in the year he was on the same schedule as he was last year, and but he was 4th in his defense in the Dubai Shima Classic on World Cup night. He ran an okay race, but certainly to me that almost had the feeling of a changing of the guard type of race where he lost his crown there. But to me the biggest factor is that they then stepped him up in trip as an experiment to about 1 3/4 miles in the Yorkshire Cup in mid-May. And just his sheer class won out there, but he had to really battle to scrape home by a head. And that's when trainer Charlie Appleby was like, well, we'll just keep him 1.5 miles now. It's like, we wanted to see if he'd fit in the staying division, but that's really stretching his stamina. It's beyond him, so we'll just cut him back and trip. Coming off what to me could be like a gutbuster type of race a month ago, and now he's back down in trip in a pretty tricky renewal of the Hardwick. And there's some really other nice horses in here. Ghost Rider just sold for £2 million on Monday to Kia Jarobchian's Ammo Racing. He's run some really good races at the Group 1 level in the past. Placed the City of Troy a couple times last year. He's hasn't quite reached the top table in terms of a breaking through, but they've experimented with different trips with him. See if a mile and a half works for him. It might bring out further improvement. But there's Al Ossi, who looks capable in his day. I know James is going to kill me for mentioning Al Rifa, because I know he's not your favorite animal, but Al Rifa's in here as well, and he's the only time he was a mile and a half on decent ground, he absolutely crushed the Grosso Price von Berlin at Hoppegarten last summer. His arc effort is basically a toss because the ground was so bad and the trip and everything. So you have a few interesting horses in here, and I just think, and also the horse that Rebels Romance had to dig deep to fend off at York, Epic Poet, he's in here as well, and he has past form at this course and distance. So I just think the fact that there are several other interesting horses in there, and coming back a month after an experiment at a much longer trip, to me it just looks like this could be a vulnerable scenario for Rebels Romance.
How often do you see horses sell like early in their 4-year-old season? I mean, this Ghost Rider selling for $2 million here recently. And that's
the fascinating thing about especially as a public sale, because you see like Wathnon Racing will open the checkbook and buy all these horses privately, so they keep adding to their.
We saw Carl Spackler, yeah.
But and in terms of for where Ghost Rider went through public auction, it was at the Golf's London sale, which is literally the Monday of Royal Ascot week. So that's where you get ready-made horses who already have Royal Ascot entries, and owners can say, hey, I can literally buy a horse at Royal Ascot this week and be there in the owners with all the owner perks and celebration and everything. So but it is interesting that Kia Jarobchian has, because he's been splurging on younger horses at the auctions, but the fact that he went to that amount to get a 4-year-old who certainly still he could still develop further. It'll be interesting to see how he does at a mile and a half, but he certainly he was always like thereabouts last year, running consistently well at top company.
Yeah, against City of Troy, who was phenomenal on the grass last year.
I'd love to have a spare 2.7 million around so I could just buy a horse and run him at Ascot and not really worry too much about anything else. But great tidbits, great information. We appreciate it on the insights on these couple of races at Ascot, Kelly. Before we get to what else we're going to talk about and look forward to, just a couple of items on our promotions list. Start off with Ascot. We have this Great Britain Races Money Back, British Racing Selected Races Money Back in partnership with GBI Racing. That's been going on for a couple of weeks, but it does include all the races at Royal Ascot. If the horse runs second, you get your money back up to $10. So if you're going to participate in the wagering at Ascot Friday and Saturday, be sure to be opted in and get yourself a little bit of insurance on what is some of the more difficult races to handicap anywhere in the world. And we have another money back for our hometown track in good old Louisville, Kentucky. Churchill Downs Selected Races money back on Saturday. A couple of races there. I believe 1 and 9 will get you your money back for second and third on Saturday at Churchill Downs. So again, if you're going to wager on that card, be sure to be opted in and playing with us. And we've got a couple of big tournaments this weekend. Ascot is one of them. It's been great to have tournament play on Ascot, and it's been fun to watch. Had 20 plus players in the tournament so far, which is great participation for the early morning hours. And we have a big one on Saturday, a $500 Royal Ascot challenge, potential Stephen Foster betting challenge, seat implications, but great cash prizes no matter how many players enter. So if you're going to play Ascot, might as well take part in the tournament and see if you could enhance your profile there. And of course, we have a Stephen Foster betting challenge qualifier for $500 as well, coming up on this coming Saturday. So be sure to participate in that. I believe we had 93 players in the qualifier last Saturday. So definitely a lot of the big contest players trying to get themselves a seat in the $3,000 Stephen Foster, which comes up next Saturday at Churchill Downs. Well, let's get into the what else is going to catch our eye and what else it is that we are going to talk about. And James, I will kick it on over to you, and you could talk about some Derby horses and others knocking heads in a Derby of a different kind on Saturday.
Yes, Saturday is the $500,000 Grade 3 Ohio Derby, the biggest race in Ohio for thoroughbreds. and got one Kentucky Derby starter in there in Chunk of Gold. He ran second in the Risen Star Louisiana Derby, and then was ninth. Actually, I thought was in a great spot, sixth going down the backstretch. Just basically raced evenly from there to be ninth. But the real story of that race is Clever Again. Here's a horse who was bet down as the 5-1 second choice in the Preakness off of a pair of brilliant wire-to-wire maiden wire-to-wire wins at Oaklawn Park. He won a mile and a 16th, maiden special weight. Then he cut back to a mile and won the Hot Springs Stakes. Now, in both of those races, Clever Again was absolutely clear a couple jumps out of the gate, had everything his own way. He went to the Preakness, and yes, I mean, the pace was hot, right? Was fast per se. 46-3 was the half mile split. But the horse who's chasing him at second at that point was Gosker. And Gosker ran a huge second. He got beat a half length for it all. He was like 5 lengths clear, a third. And he was out there going at 46 and change too. And Clever, again, folded his 10. I know he got interfered with in stretch, but he was going backwards at that point. Here's a horse, to me, is going to come right back. He's 9-5 on the morning line. Could be 4-5 come post time because people think he's just this superstar 2-turn speed horse. He's going to have to prove it to me because there's a 6-furlong sprinter in here named Moplex who's coming off a front-running win where he was setting the early pace in the Bayshore Stakes at Aqueduct. So there's some speed in there to at least be prompting Clever Again on the front end. Like I said, horses that have everything their own way on the lead, I will not take them at extremely short odds until they can prove they can win in a different fashion or manner. He's also, the 9-furlong distance could be a challenge for Clever Again. I like Chunk of Gold. I look for him to be in a good spot just off the early leaders and come with this run in the stretch. So I like Chunk of Gold in the Ohio Derby. And I want to mention real quick, the feature at Churchill on Saturday is the Grade 2 Chicago. This race got a dynamite field. We have Vava, the defending champ, in there. She was won the Grade 1 Derby City Distaff last year and was 4-for-4 at Churchill coming into this year. But Vava tailed off last year, did run well in the Breeders' Cup Filly Mare Sprint, and she comes off a well-beaten 7th to Copian in the Derby City Distaff. She's actually the 3-1 second choice. Emery's the favorite. She ran 5th, beaten like 10 lengths in the Derby City Distaff too. The thing about those fillies is that both of them, would be no surprise if they did prove best. But I'm going to be trying to beat them. First off, I'm going to mention 2 others in there. Zytlos. Zytlos to me is absolutely maybe one of the top 3 6-furlong dirt female sprinters out there potentially this year. Her issue is 7 furlongs. She's 0-for-2 at the distance. We'll see if she can finally cross that hurdle as a 5-year-old on Saturday. Claret Barrett enters and exits a 19-length win at Gulfstream. First start for Safi Joseph. They got a huge number. But my main squeeze, this is a filly that ran twice at Churchill last year, the 8 Bells and the Dogwood in the fall. She won both of them by open lengths, an absolute course specialist. I think she's had 2 good setups this year for Mike Maker, running 3rd in the Grade 1 Madison and 3rd in the Grade 2 Ruffian. And I think getting back at Churchill, I like number 9, my main squeeze in the Grade 2 Chicago. Listen, we have had some unbelievable races there this year for Filly Mare sprinters. I think Too Sharp, the Winning Colors winner, is dynamite. Copian is the best Filly Mare dirt sprinter in the country. She won the Derby City Distaff. And even Look Ford, who won the 8 Bells. She came back and ran second in the Acorn, and it's a good filly for Mike McCarthy. So I'm looking forward to the Chicago on Saturday. Got 11 horse field. Should be a good betting race.
Yep, and kicking off what will be the last week of racing leading up to the Stephen Foster, what's been a tremendous meet at Churchill Downs this spring.
It's Downs after dark too. Excuse me, Darin. Yep. First post 6 p.m. on Saturday night.
Yep. Good tidbit. Thank you for that. I also I'm going to put my top hat on and talk a little bit of Ascot and my what else, but focusing in on an American runner that's taking a big swing in She's So Spicy, who, since moving into the turf sprint division for 3-year-old fillies, has been freakishly good, carrying her talent from South Florida at Gulfstream to Keeneland and then to Churchill Downs most recently, in which she defeated Kilwin, who actually came out of that race to run on dirt and won a stakes race coming out of that. So She's So Spicy has kept tremendous form here in the States and is really going to get what I guess we can call an acid test here against a horse like Shadow of Light, who was beaten just a length by Ruling Court in the 2000 Guineas. Obviously, She's So Spicy has not seen anything of that magnitude. She's also facing, as you can imagine, Colts and Geldings in here, and facing some horses that you're going to know some names of. Whistle Jacket is a horse that I actually bet in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf Sprint last year and ran pretty well, coming from a really tough spot to be beaten 2 lengths, and actually won a start since then, was second in a Grade 3 in Ireland following that as well. Shadow of Light, who I already talked about, won the Darley Dewhurst and the Juddmonte Middle Park, 2 very prestigious races in the 2-year-old season last year. So obviously he's a horse that has a lot of form. Juddmonte has a horse who's coming off a Grade 3 win in Babouche as well. So there's a lot of horses here that she's going to have to contend with. And Kelly, I guess my question would be, as an American follower, how huge of an ask is this? Because on paper, this looks really, really tough.
It really is. And to me, the real difficulty for her is the fact this is a stiff 6 furlongs at Ascot. So you really have to get probably beyond 6 furlongs in American conditions to be able to make 6 furlongs straight away on a track like Ascot. And I think that Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint will be ideal conditions for turning, just to put the best, the premium on her biggest weapon, which is speed. At Ascot, she doesn't have to just show her speed. She has to show more stamina than she's ever had to show stateside, or at least have been able to show stateside. And I think that is the biggest question mark. And also the fact that she probably, at least from what was publicly reported, she wouldn't have been here if it hadn't been for Qatar Racing buying into her. And that's when Ascot jumped onto the itinerary, because I think she was just going to point for the logical targets here in her division. So I think that's the other angle, is that in terms of like new co-owner intent for wanting to bring her over to Royal Ascot. And as you mentioned, these are, not just males, but these are just like absolute elite, bona fide, top class Group 1 males. As you said, Shadow of Light, is certainly got form in the book. And aside from Babouche, who's exciting for Juddmonte also has the Colt Jonquil, who just missed in the French 2000 Guineas, who's cutting back in trip. So it's we're talking about classic performing males here. And I would also, just as a postscript to Whistle Jacket, who of course is the ride of Ryan Moore as the Coolmore's number 1. But you'd also have to look at, to me, the potential price play in there would be his Aidan O'Brien stablemate, Ides of March, because I think these conditions are just going to suit him to a T. Robust 6 furlongs, fast ground. I think he could exceed expectations as well, even though he's ostensibly Ballydoyle's second in here, but he's definitely very, very capable. And I think just as you said, you wouldn't hold Whistle Jacket's juvenile turf sprint against him. Ides of March was there too, beaten by Whistle Jacket at Del Mar, but that was not the right scenario for either of them. And I think Aidan O'Brien even basically said as much when he sent Ides of March, was like, this was just something to it would bring him on for this year. It'd be a great experience. It was almost like, I'm tempted to call it like a semester abroad type thing. It was basically more of an educational run, knowing that turning 5 furlongs was not really going to be his bag. So I think he's interesting.
Kelly, I got a question for you. With this Shadow of Light, I know that, he was a multiple Group 1 winner as a juvenile. They bring him back in the Guineas. He gets beat a length. He was a close third. He could have gone to one of these mile big races at Royal Ascot. Are you surprised to see Charlie Appleby cut him back to 6 furlongs?
Yeah, that's a really good point, because part of it was because of what happened with Epsom Derby, because Ruling Court was initially supposed to be in the Derby, and it was when the ground came up softer than ideal, it's when they scratched him, and it probably was the right decision afterward, because we saw how Lambourne just basically bossed it from the front end, and Ruling Court, that would not have been the right scenario for him at all either. So that's when Ruling Court ended up going to the St. James's Palace as his fallback position, because he wasn't at Epsom. And Shadow of Light was initially expected to stay at a mile for St. James's Palace, or at least that was the thing that we thought he was going to do. And then once Ruling Court was slotted into St. James's Palace, and that's when it was like, okay, now we're cutting Shadow of Light back. So I think that in terms of just in principle, I do like the idea of high class horses who get beaten in mile classics coming back to the sprint division, which is typically an easier spot. I think the thing for me about Shadow of Light is not just the cutback, but because I still think, Appleby thinks he'll still stay a mile, so we might see him at a mile feature someplace else this summer. Because as you said, he certainly was not beaten far, and you could also say that maybe if he'd moved a little later, maybe he would have finished a little closer. But be that as it may, to me the bigger question is the ground, because all of his marquee form comes with given the ground, varying degrees of rain softened ground. It's not that I think that he wouldn't act on very quick ground, but the point is does soft ground kind of move him up, whereas these other horses who really need quick conditions, they will be able to show their true colors here too. So how much is a very very strongly run 6 furlongs on quick ground, is that going to be something that is his cup of tea, as opposed to if the weather were different and it were softer going, that would be a totally different equation. But that to me is, given the fact that he's basically trading at such a short price right now, it's like you're basically banking on the fact that he's going to be the same. He's going to have the same, gears, in such fast conditions up against horses who are going to love it.
Well, Kelly, you're also looking at another race at Ascot to kick off the Saturday card. Juveniles, a battle of heavyweights. Godolphin versus Coolmore, $2 million son of Frankel out of a stakes winning mare versus a filly by Justify out of Shell House, who's stakes placed in her own right and a brilliant producer herself. Really intriguing race to kick off the Saturday card with some juveniles.
It really is. It's the opener at Royal Ascot, the Chesham Stakes, which is a 7 furlongs. So you're already talking about juveniles who have to have stamina to be able to do 7 furlongs at this point in their careers. And also there's a conditions limitation where you have to be by a sire who's won over 1.25 miles or more. Now they do grandfather in like 1 3/16 miles. Technically it's 1.25 miles. They just say 1 3/16 miles will count. But the bottom line is that your sire has to have shown stamina in his own career to even be eligible for this race. And as you mentioned that, the Godolphin versus Coolmore angle, Godolphin's Tranmore was the heavy favorite going in, because he's the Goff's Orby sales topper when he went for €2 million as a yearling. And he really looked very, very good in his lone start so far at Newmarket. He looked like he might be worth every euro of that. The way he traveled through the race, just totally on the bridle, just pushed clear, basically effortlessly. Very nice way of going. So Tranmore, immediately, people were already wondering, are you going to go to the Coventry with this horse, because the Newmarket race was 6 furlongs. But right off the bat, it was like, no, the Chesham is the race for him. So that he has been, targeting this race ever since his Newmarket debut. The main thing about him, though, is that he's being supplanted for the favorites role now by Aidan O'Brien's filly Moments of Joy, partly because O'Brien's mopping up all the juvenile races at Royal Ascot this week. So I think you can see that the bettors are saying, do we really want to take on an Aidan O'Brien 2-year-old at this stage when he just keeps beating us? So the one thing I'll say about Moments of Joy, though, is that she was actually the second string in the Leopardstown Maiden that she won. Interestingly enough, the maiden she won is the same race that Bedtime Story won last year before she went on to just absolutely pummel the boys in this race. So, and I talked myself off Bedtime Story infamously last year because she was the second string in the maiden. And I must be incorrigible, because I'm probably do the exact same thing again with Moments of Joy, thinking, she wasn't the stable's number one in that maiden she won. So maybe we shouldn't go overboard on backing her into favoritism here, notwithstanding how the Ballydoyle juveniles have just been a murderer's row this week, basically. So Tranmore has so much upside, even though he's stepping up to 7 furlongs. Could he end up actually being a slightly better price because people are flocking to Moments of Joy now? That would be interesting to watch the market. Wathnon, the emerging power from the Qatari Emir. They've also got interesting contender in here named Humidity. They just acquired him as well. Humidity is a full brother to Holloway Boy, who famously won this race in his career debut in 2022. So Humidity's trying to emulate his full brother here. Of course, with unexposed juveniles, very interesting pedigrees, you can pretty much make a case for several of these, potentially stepping up at price. The one I wanted to mention, who could be a little bit sneaky, is called the Secret Adversary. He's from the first crop of St. Mark's Basilica, who was a European champion for O'Brien a few years ago, and he actually I'm tempted to say he's almost like a Ballydoyle horse by proxy, because he ran at Leopardstown. He ran excellent second to another O'Brien juvenile named Italy. And the Secret Adversary is trained by Fozzie Stack, who also trained his dam Too Soon to Panic. So I think that the Secret Adversary has 7 furlong form. He ran an excellent race when he just got run down by Italy at Leopardstown. So I think, he could be slightly overlooked here, just because of everybody. Obviously, you're looking at, the splashy, Godolphin runner and Tranmore, and Coolmore's Moments of Joy, and obviously the humidity with another pedigree angle going for him. But I do think the Secret Adversary could be a little bit interesting at a price.
Great insights into closing day and at Ascot. It's been a very interesting meeting so far. A couple more days to go. Don't forget to participate in the money back on it and play in those tournaments as well. Well, Kellie, thanks so much for joining us on the jury this week. We appreciate your insights. Best of luck to everybody that is wagering this weekend, and we will see you back here for another edition of the jury with Best Bets and Fades, where Ashley will be back in the host chair next week.
When it comes to horse racing, you can never have too much information. With TwinSpires, you can place your bets with confidence, whether you use handicapping insights like our Brisnet speed ratings, prime power and past performances, the guidance of our experts' top picks, or just choose a name that catches your eye. Yes! No matter how you pick your horse, bet with TwinSpires. And now you can race to victory with TwinSpires tournaments.